Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director, Event Programming at MediaPost, and thanks for joining us for another installment of MediaPost webinar series. MediaPost series bring together the media, marketing, and advertising community to learn more about the methods and technologies that really make business possible across a variety of categories. And it's brought to you by some of the leading solution providers, marketers, and practitioners in the industry. Now, today we're going to talk about how data and creativity can be used more effectively together in digital marketing. We're going to focus on using insights to inform creative strategies that lead to better outcomes. And to illustrate this, we'll look at a campaign created in partnership with Machete, Market Wake, and Digital Remedy. Now, before I bring on our panelists, I want to let you know that during the presentation, if you have any questions, you think of any questions, write them in the question box on your screen, and we will do our best at the end to answer them. We are taking a question set time at the end of the panel discussion, so please put them in there, and hopefully we can help you out as soon as possible. So with that said, let me introduce our panel of marketing experts: Sasha Stevens, a business advisor at Machete; Anna Kate Newall, the Senior Account Manager at Market Wake; and Digital Remedies Team Lead of Client Services, Lesley Stanley. Hey ladies, welcome.
Hi Lisa, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, well, I'm really excited about this conversation. We've had so much interest in it, but before we get started, just so people know a little bit about you, if you can each introduce yourself and your role and what you're doing with your company. And Sasha, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sasha, and I'm a business consultant with a proven track record in implementing strategic initiatives with my clients. I excel at guiding companies through critical business transitions through sale and marketing strategies. Today, I'm representing Machete, a global jewelry brand that produces mindfully made handcrafted accessories based out of Atlanta.
Great. Lesley.
Hi, I'm Lesley Stanley. I'm based out of New Orleans. I'm a team lead, as mentioned, on the client success team, and we focus our media optimization and background in expertise in the DSPs and advertising platforms to best inform our decisions around your campaign execution.
Awesome.
And Anna Kate.
Thanks for having us, Lisa. I'm Anna Kate Newell. I'm a senior account manager at Market Wake, and I'm really responsible for bridging the gap between Sasha and the rest of the Machete team and Lesley and the Digital Remedy team to build, execute, and optimize performance marketing strategies that really meet our clients' larger campaign and business goals. Excited to be here, excited to share with everyone some of the testing and creative execution that we've done for Machete in the past.
All right, well, it's great to meet you guys. And again, as I said, this is definitely topics that show a lot of interest. We've had a lot of interest in this, so let's just dive in. But let's talk about just when we've seen the shifts to digital and brands of embracing more of that data-driven approach to optimization. How has creative strategy changed in the last 5 years? Let's first start with you, Lesley.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest impacts on the landscape is around immediacy. So both in the expectations of users, they're expecting that kind of immediate response and interaction with a brand, but also as time on devices increase, the influx of new devices, influx of new platforms, there's immediacy in the sense of how quickly you can get back insightful and meaningful results. So advertisers can increasingly be informed really by real-time data on their ad engagements. It allows for budgets to be spent more efficiently and effectively overall. We're going to continue to see ad types emerge that focus on interactivity, brand immersion, as we move away from that era of one-way communication and into a vision of a more holistic, I would say, omni-channel approach.
Mm-hmm. Great. Sasha, do you have anything to add for that?
No, I don't have anything. Well, I mean, I think the main thing there is that we want to make sure that we're converting and we're meeting all of our goals. And I think that we pass that off to them and let them know, like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. What's the best way to do that? And Lesley's team was really good at doing that.
So, and that's really what got this campaign running. Well, before we even get into more of that, Anna Kate, I want to ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges that are really emerging during this time?
Yeah, I would say for everyone in the audience, you can probably relate to the fact that the media landscape has evolved a lot, not just over the past 5 years, but even the last 1 year. The media landscape looks much different this year than it did 6, 12, 18 months ago. And that's something that we're always kind of up against, not just for Machete, but for all of our clients at Market Week. It's really figuring out how can we shift strategy, evolve our creative and campaign executions to help kind of combat some of that. We've always had a really strong media mix in the use case for Machete across what we would consider traditional digital channels. So Meta, Google, Pinterest even, but we were getting to a point of scale where we needed to think outside of the box and not just rely on those traditional channels that have served us really well, but focus on what are new things, new tactics that we can switch on that are going to continue to help us meet and exceed those business goals and conversion goals from the Machete side.
Got it. Well, and so talk about that, Sasha, in terms of what were you, if we're getting into the campaign and really talking about the campaign, wanting to do this, you sort of mentioned why you got involved, but what were your goals? What was really the objectives and your strategies for this campaign?
Yes. So we had just launched a new website, and our goal was to be able to convert more people. But then we also wanted to diversify our media mix, as Anna Kate mentioned. We have a diverse media mix, but we always want to find out what's new to make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve. And around this time, because of the new website, we wanted something that was a little more low risk. And so when this was presented to us, it felt like an easy way to introduce something to our customers and allow them to convert easier.
Yeah, and in terms, Anna Kate.
Oh, sorry, Lisa.
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to jump in. Lesley, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say another challenge, and it sort of bounces off both of what Anna Kate and Sasha were saying, is that the walled garden experience, right? Anna Kate reflected on very commonly when we think about traditional digital media mixes, we're staying that very social place, all of these very data siloed, data locked down zones. When we're thinking about creative strategy and talking about moving out of the walled garden, there's a lot of really wonderful and exciting things that are happening in terms of creative design and flexibility in creative design that you don't really get if you stay in that walled garden where you're locked into certain ad formats. You don't have that flexibility that we're seeing with some of these programmatic takes on dynamic carousels and things like that.
Yeah. In that kind of same vein, one of the things that was kind of affirming for us in making a decision to test something like this is the ability to kind of explore the programmatic world before this. This is a really high impact media type for us that we had a little bit of additional confidence in going into because we had tried some other programmatic placements. We were really comfortable with our audiences from a programmatic display perspective, some of the high performing creatives. And so we had some additional levers in our back pocket that make every marketer a little bit more confident in trying something new.
Well, and just in terms of when you're talking the brand perspective goals and really being able to balance that sort of testing and the data that you're getting, can you expand on that? I know you're sort of touched on it, but can you expand on that a little more?
Yeah, I think that consistently and constantly, we're always trying to iterate our media approach to balance what are traffic driving efforts, what are middle kind of the funnel conversion campaigns that we can have in the mix, and then what are the things that we can do at the really bottom of the funnel to actually convert all of the people that we're engaging with. And that's something that these high impact placements have allowed us to do. We're going to talk a lot about that click to cart ad type, which is something that's really strong from a conversion perspective, but we have been able to balance some of those top and mid funnel goals in this campaign mix as well, which is something that we're always trying to balance. We want to be able to have our media mix and our media investment work as strong for us as it possibly can, but we need to balance those two priorities. And that's something that this test, along with the other tests that we've done with Lesley and the Digital Remedy team, have allowed us to do.
Yeah, Lesley, I see you shaking your head. So you're obviously in a lot of agreement with this. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. While ROAS is always our guiding light, just as Anna Kate was saying, we want to make sure that we're always staying flexible as the season changes, as new product rolls out. We want to make sure that the creative is keeping up with those changes. And so we heavily lean into other metrics. We're looking at engagement, taps on certain tiles, time spent on different slides, All of that gets really, really important if you want to stay responsive and flexible.
Well, in talking about creative, let's dive into creative strategy. And really, Anna Kate, I want to start with you. How did the creative strategy really align with Sasha's objectives, the campaign's objectives?
Yeah, the creative strategy is something that was really integral to the success of this campaign. Sasha, myself, and Lesley all feel very strongly about the way that the brand is portrayed. And so we needed to be able to be confident in the executions that we had in this tile kind of format. We have really strong editorial and on model and then product images as well. And so we really tried to use some of our key learnings from some of our other campaigns across our media mix to inform the ways that we executed in the first iteration. So something that's really important from a learnings perspective is that we knew dynamic campaigns performed really strongly on Meta. Everyone's probably familiar with those ad types that are very clean. They really are focusing on the product. And so that gave us a really strong indicator to say, like, we know that this creative type works. We know that this visual format works. And that's why we decided to kind of start with some of the placements that we did and some of the initial tests. It's not just about product performance, though. It's about the way that the brand is portrayed, too. And so we did have some checks and balances, I would say, in place with Lesley and team to be able to effectively confirm that we were representing the brand in the way that we wanted.
Well, and I'm sure, Sasha, that's so important to you in keeping that brand integrity. How do you ensure that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that we're always keeping a big eye on, especially when you're thinking about new website, rebranding, things like that. You spend a lot of time thinking about how you want to look and feel and what you want, what type of emotions you want to evoke from your customers. So when it comes to ads, that's usually the area that you have to be a little bit more lenient to test and learn. But as long as what we made sure that we did is that we paid attention to what are our non-negotiables, what are the things that have to be in our ads, what are things that absolutely cannot be in our ads, just isn't aligned with us, and we stuck along those lines. So even though it might not be something that we liked, that was more so subjective, as long as it didn't cross over a line, we allowed ourselves to test it, and having that agility really helped in the long run. And it also allowed us to kind of think outside the box, because what we thought that our customer liked, clearly they liked something else if they were open to clicking on those items and converting. So
right. Well, I love that you mentioned that about thinking outside the box, which I think it was Anna Kate talked about that early on. And are these things that maybe, as you said, you might not have thought about? You were maybe thinking your customers wanted something different. So how important is it to maybe have that nudge to sort of, as you say, think outside the box?
It's extremely important to have some wiggle room there, but it's equally as important to make sure you understand your point of view. And I think that's where most people go wrong, is that they have very strong opinions, but they may not have a strong point of view about their brand. And so if you know exactly what your point of view and what your non-negotiables are, it's easier to be lenient, because you say, hey, well, it's checking off all these boxes. It will not hurt for us to test this out. And it allows you to open up doors to things that you may not have been open to previously.
So I would say that's something that, just to kind of add on to something Sasha said, that's something that we've kind of improved flexing our muscle for a little bit over time. I mentioned some of the infrastructure that we had in place to be confident in the things that we were testing, but we've also improved over time our ability and confidence in testing things out. Sasha and I have many conversations like, hey, I'm not totally obsessed with this, but how is it performing? And then we're able to actually lean on the data to make the decisions of the things that we want to run, the things that we want to optimize, while keeping in mind those non-negotiables, because there are some things that we're not willing to budge on. And so kind of balancing both of those, but also knowing that the performance and the data is going to be the thing that leads us in the direction that we want to go.
Right. Well, and when you say that and how they're performing, so how are you measuring that success in performance? What are your KPIs?
Yeah, definitely. This is a very conversion-oriented effort. So our goals going to Lesley and team are always to really prioritize conversion volume, conversion value, and then our return. So we want to be able to have a high impact with our media investment, drive a lot of purchase conversions, but also be able to balance how much it's costing for us to acquire those customers and then our return. So we're looking at this as a part of our overall media mix. So we're able to kind of lean on our overall media return. That's a really big part of this. But outside of those kind of big goals, we also have a few smaller goals that are helping us and kind of acting as guiding indicators and guiding lights for our success, which are things Lesley and I are often communicating about. So being able to measure how frequently certain products are getting clicked to the website, how often are we showing a certain product category. For us, we know Apple Watch bands are really high performers, but we really want to be able to balance out both watch bands and hair, for instance, and jewelry and accessories. And so that those are conversations that Lesley and I are having to kind of guide from a performance perspective as well, because it's not just about revenue and return. It's also about what products are getting an appropriate amount of coverage, how effectively can we get them to the site, and then even bring them into some of our remarketing funnels across our larger campaign mix.
Well, Lesley, let's then turn to you in terms of all the different products and evaluating them. How are you testing each product type?
Yeah, definitely. When we make these kind of considerations around organization in a individual creative unit, we know a couple of things tend to be a little bit more tried and true, right? Your first image slide is often your most clicked, followed by your fourth image slide, and because that's beginning, end. And so anytime we find little trends that break norms, that's a big flag. Anytime we see a trend that may not reflect intuitive understanding. So if we see a sunglasses thing that is underperforming by a benchmark in a typically seasonal appropriate zone, then that would be something we would flag and kind of measure out against. So individually, it is a little bit of a process, right? But what's great about these ad units is that they're so immediately responsive, is that you get a lot of playtime with them that you don't usually experience. And I think a lot of different channels that you kind of need to wait that full maybe 30 days post-launch. This is an area where you can have a little bit of more of a dynamic A to B testing experience on multiple factors against multiple products. And it gives you the opportunity, I think, and what is, I think, my favorite part of this is that I never think that there is no bad creative. There just is we have to really work the strategy to complement them and find the environment where they are going to thrive. That being said, sometimes you do have to throw something out of, your rotation or your creative weighting. But these are the kind of creative setups that encourage you to find the avenue of success.
And I like to add to that also. I think another thing to think about too is with this particular ad set data is that it's very clean. So oftentimes with marketers, we notice that there may be an ad creative that features one item and it's driving sales to a completely different item that has nothing to do with that category. Whereas with this, I know that if they clicked on this ad, they're also getting that product. So it takes a little bit of the work out of trying to figure out, okay, did this customer actually just like this or did they just like the creative? So that links to this data as well.
Well, and how much do the different products inform
the other much. So much. Oftentimes it's, you'll notice that there's correlations to certain products. And sometimes it's price point driven. And sometimes it's I want multiple colors of a clip. Or sometimes it's, hey, I like these earrings and I can't pick between silver and gold. So I'm just going to go ahead and get both. Yes. So there's always some type of correlation. Now, it's interesting whenever we find a new pairing, but it definitely, like I said, it takes that layer off at least that we're guessing of it, is this ad actually driving to a certain product? So.
Wow. Lesley also mentioned the seasonality piece, which I think is important. I don't know if that was this question or the one before, but that's another big kind of trend that we're following as well, is sunglasses per se. Like, we're not all buying sunglasses in winter. If you are, we would love that. Please click on an ad before you do so, but we aren't all purchasing sunglasses in the winter, and sometimes better geographies in the US bode better for that product. And so we've done a little bit of testing and theorizing about, we know LA, for instance, that performs really well for sunglasses, those kind of generally warmer climates. And so while that maybe isn't an evergreen product that we always want to be showing in these ad creatives, we do have enough data to kind of guide us towards Lesley telling me, like, okay, it's summertime, let's use this prime time and these warm weather locations to maybe advertise a product that isn't always top of mind for us in our product mix.
Well, and how important is that? I mean, because as you said, there are seasonal products, but you don't necessarily want to drop the other products that
Right.
maybe aren't, in season, for lack of a better word. How are you
Yeah.
complementing those kind of products?
Yeah, I would say it's a variety of knowing, kind of having our products broken down into maybe different categories. So things that we know that generally bode better for something that's seasonal. So sunglasses maybe, where we have a product category that we know performs really strongly regardless of the time of the year, but maybe for a first-time customer versus a returning customer. So we do try to look at our product and our collections in a very collected way, for lack of a better word, to figure out like, okay, we know these bestsellers, watch bands, hair accessories, a pair of hoops, and maybe a monogram necklace. We know that those are really high performing. And so that's how we're going to go about combining those into this product tile, because this is very dynamic and visual in nature. And so we want to be intentional about the products that we're choosing to show, and not just do something really haphazard. That's where the creative strategy and then also the product strategy comes in the mix. That's conversations I'm having with Sasha to say like, hey, we want to really focus on, we're launching some new colorways. Obsidian, black matte, white matte, we're launching some new things that we want to have solid coverage for. Those are the ways that we're going about activating our creative based on not only just performance trends, but insights and kind of conversations that we're having from a business priority perspective as well.
Well, and then keeping with that and aligning your media strategy and your media planning and putting all of that, let's look at it in terms of the perspective from Market Wake. How has that influenced in what you're doing?
I would say that's honestly one of the best parts about this ad type in particular. As you all probably know, sometimes the ad creative is a challenging piece. It takes a lot of effort to kind of produce. We have to account for resizing and revisions and all of these steps, where this ad type is much more dynamic, which Lesley hit on a few times throughout this conversation, but allows us to be a little bit more proactive and align with speed, which is really important. That's not always a tool that we have in our back pocket. So that's something that makes this ad type really great for us in our media mix. The other thing that's really important kind of from a general marketing strategy, kind of media strategy standpoint, is the way that we're going about controlling the test. So what we don't want to do is put a bunch of new factors into the market. We don't want to have new creative, new audiences, new price or new budget all at the same time. We really want to focus on the things that we can control. And that's something that we are really intentional about going into this test from a media perspective. Is we knew that we had a really good pulse on our audiences. Lesley has helped us do a lot of testing to figure out where those like prime time audiences really are. And so we were able to really approach this activation as like, let's focus on creative and product mix, and we don't really have to worry about audience because we know that those are really baked into our overall strategy. So it's kind of a balance of all of those. It's not just creative. There's a lot of important creative elements, but there's also some kind of tactical audience planning, all of those strategies that play into it as well.
Well, and just from everything you guys are saying, I mean, obviously data is huge. It plays a huge role. And Lesley, let me turn this to you. How is the data and how are the insights? How are they really driving your creative?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to make sure that we could walk away answering, I think, a lot of folks' common questions when it comes to creative. What does it come down to when we're talking about the imagery? What's the impact of changing a certain product out for another? What's the impact of changing that in terms of the creative's effectiveness? Maybe that product has like a longer time spent, but are we seeing a bigger audience response when they get to the site? From there, what's the impact of a more person-centric maybe versus a more product-centric? Does that vary by audience or placement? So we wanted to make sure we could answer all these kinds of questions while doing it quickly. So like Anna Kate said, we try to make sure we isolate down those variables where we can, and then do a lot of rapid A/B testing of these sort of like micro decisions about the creative, because we can do that with this kind of ad type.
Well, and you sort of informed what I was kind of thinking of with all these different testing, but you need to, as you both just said, you can't change up too many things at once, because then you're not sure, is it this that worked or this that had the impact? So, but to that point, to do so many different variables, I know you're doing them quickly, but really, how are you maintaining in terms of really collecting that data and really being able to see so you can move forward, and how are you keeping more efficient with it?
Yeah, we definitely make sure that we're always looking at something with a larger perspective, right? So as Anna Kate discussed, we ran coming into our second year or so with Machete. We have data from last year. We do comparative analysis all the time. We make sure that we're always grounding ourselves in our concrete benchmark numbers, and we make sure that that's reflected in when we talk about those numbers. We're making sure that that's reflected by the current budget that we're working with. So it's hard to say like always compare this against say 0.2. Wait, you really have to make sure that you're thinking about the budget that you're working with in terms of the individual benchmarks that you're going to set. So sometimes it's going to be as easy as saying make sure that you have at least 100 events, and then you're going to be sitting in an area where you can start to make concrete decisions. And other times you're going to have to be a little bit more flexible than that. But flexibility is kind of the name of the game when you're thinking in this sort of environment. And it's not always something that is, you can kind of take for granted with programmatic media that there is a constant algorithmic optimization process that's happening in the background. So not everything is these massive lever pulls. You want to make sure that the engine has time to warm up and run a little bit.
Got it. And well, so Anna Kate, talk about these insights that from all this testing, you're getting all of these insights, all of this data. What were the results on a creative perspective?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we really learned about this ad type in particular is the way that it can drive forward multiple different goals. I mentioned earlier, we're always trying to balance how do we effectively spend at the top of the funnel? What are we doing at the middle of the funnel? How do we really prioritize the bottom of the funnel? That's a lot of competing priorities, and this creative really helped us honestly tackle many of those at the same time, which is not always the case. Sometimes that's really hard to do with one creative type, but we were able to see from a ad format that we were able to better understand which things were the levers that we could pull to hit all of those goals. So in this case, we're typically showing 4 products. Someone maybe is clicking to the site and not purchasing. Even though they didn't purchase, that's giving us an indicator to know which of the product is getting them to the site, and then bringing them into our remarketing funnels, not only on programmatic placements, but our other channels as well. The other thing from a creative standpoint that we've learned a lot is the difference between our product image and our editorial images. In ad creative, we're very, very often leaning on those editorial images, but I mentioned that our dynamic campaigns on Meta perform well, and that's what gave us the indicator to try this here. And we've generally seen that those product images perform a little bit better than editorial in this placement type. It gives a very clear indicator as to what the product is, what it looks like. As we all know, when we're buying jewelry and accessories, we need to know like size and scale. How big is it going to be on our ear? All of those factors we've been able to understand a little bit better when we're testing multiple creative types and figure out, okay, maybe editorial isn't the best image type for this creative type, but where else can we use it in our mix to bring people into our funnels and then get them to this ad type that's a little bit more dynamic and product forward to actually convert.
And so Lesley, you talked about, we've talked about how important on the technology side, how important these tests were in terms of determining creative. But were there any specific tech considerations or maybe innovations that really were crucial for this particular campaign's success?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say test, just to broadly answer the question, it's extremely important to test and learn, always. I usually recommend, if possible, to always reserve at least 5 to 10% of your budget towards testing into new media, testing into new creative, new approaches. It can feel very risky, but in the long term, it helps keep you in the foreground of users' attentions and what is becoming and is and will be a very noisy space. These emerging like interactive and dynamic creative formats provide that real-time data access so that all of your decisions end up being data-driven and thereby just more budget efficient, again, in that long-run big picture. Kind of going back a little bit, some more on the tech-specific side, obviously we've talked a lot about being able to get back these readouts on the data that are drilled down to what products are being touched, exactly where on the ad unit, things like that. We also do a lot about looking into methodology, and this relates to everything Anna Kate was saying in terms of multiple goals and trying to balance all of those things. So when we look at the effectiveness of an individual tactic unit, we don't just consider maybe last touch, which I think everyone is the most familiar with. By default, most of the walled garden platforms are going to report back as a last touch approach to the methodology and attribution. But when we've made considerations around like, okay, so we're seeing this thing, it's driving a really high CTR on our shoppable carousels. We see this really dynamic 0.4 CTR. That's awesome, so exciting. And it's definitely seeing an impact on our remarketing campaigns and our little bit more of our more conversion focused ones. And that feels very intuitive and that feels like it makes sense. But by looking at the data through multiple lenses, so maybe taking a first touch approach, we started to notice some interesting things where when we had creative flat across an audience type, this particular audience type was much more responsive in terms of being a prospecting and new customer acquisition focused unit. So learning those kinds of different things it's really important to make sure that you are leveraging tech and data that is able to be that flexible, because the ideal is that you're seeing a multi-touch methodological approach when you start to have to think about making your campaigns holistic and omnichannel.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously with all the different touch points, as you said, you need to kind of combine them and bring them together and figure out how it drives the consumer down the funnel, hopefully. But I do want to say, because I love to hear about lessons learned, and I want to actually start with you, Sasha, for this. In terms of you're seeing the outcomes of the campaign and results, and Lesley was just talking about you have to learn from each and then you adapt. What are recommendations you might have moving forward, or for anyone else interested in doing something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the main thing is that like she said, we want to make sure that we're always data driven, because you want to be able to yield results with the things that you're doing. But being okay with being an early adopter is really big, and specifically being okay with developing your benchmarks. And I think that's the part that's the scariest, is when it's something that not only do you not know anything about it, there's not much information from others to the case studies to be able to review in detail, or close case studies to your model. So being okay with taking a risk and just monitoring that risk and investing the amount that you feel comfortable with in that risk.
Yeah, makes sense. And so for Anna Kate, for you
as
well. Oh, sorry. Did someone jump in? Oh.
No, you're good.
I want to ask in terms of lessons learned for you as well. Like obviously there's certain strategies you took, there's certain insights you took from this. Were there any new tactics that you learned from this that you would then try to use in a future campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the thing that we are the most confident in walking away from this campaign in particular is the desire to continue using it. Like Sasha said, we were an early adopter, we were an early mover on this ad type, which we love to be an early mover, but it's even better when it works out in a way that helps us kind of boast our confidence on this being a part of our media mix moving forward. That being said, we're confident in the ad type, but something that Sasha and I talk about often is kind of the mindset of always testing, always iterating. These ad types were not available to us at the last Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so the time period coming up represents a big time for us to kind of continue learning. While we've learned a lot, we do have a lot in our back pocket. We are opening ourselves to kind of continue learning over the next couple of weeks, couple of months, knowing that we're getting into a totally different time seasonally. The other thing from kind of a marketing strategy, media strategy perspective, I would say that really stands out is the measurement piece. I was at a conference last week and they said, if you can't measure it, don't do it. And I couldn't agree more. And that's something that we're really lucky to have a partner in Lesley in. Where we work together really hand in hand and closely to figure out what are the things that we can measure, what are the things that are important for me to share back with Sasha and the rest of the Machete team, but also how can we make sure that we are proactively working towards those benchmarks that Sasha mentioned. It was hard initially to be like, okay, these are standard maybe click-through rate benchmarks, and we don't really want to compare our maybe ROAS to other people when we don't have the same level of media investment and the size of the business is different. So we worked really closely to figure out those pieces to be able to effectively communicate that back to Sasha and kind of instill that same confidence in the team to continue testing this moving forward. And then the last thing I would say, which I personally love to hear this take when I go on a webinar or I'm at a conference, is that there is a lot to be said about saying yes. It's really challenging sometimes in the position that I sit in between Lesley and Sasha, which are two really great partners to have, but I have to sit in between like, hey, I know that this is a great opportunity. It feels like a really strong, kind of well-aligned opportunity for us from a media tactics standpoint, but then I need to go to Sasha and kind of convince her to do something that no one's doing yet. And so it's hard to sometimes say yes, but there's a lot to be found when we have the opportunity to say yes. I found some of the most successful campaigns and the most promising things that we've learned have simply come from being willing to say, let's try this, let's at least dedicate, like Lesley mentioned, a small portion of our budget to exploring this. And in that, we've basically pivoted our whole strategy programmatically to focus on this ad type. So we really aren't doing much of that more traditional programmatic display because we have found the confidence in something like this that, again, it wasn't easy in the beginning to be like, yes, let's allocate a portion of our budget to try something new. Even though we were confident in it, it's a little bit hard to get to that point, which from my perspective, when it works out really well, it makes all of those conversations much easier to have had.
Well, I'm sure, and obviously Sasha was able to say yes and think out of the box, so that was obviously helpful. But sometimes maybe it's those small little testings and then expand. But I want to go to you, Lesley, just because we need to know technology and what we're going to be using. What should people, when they're considering their strategy based on these learnings, what tech should marketers consider integrating into their campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I can't state the importance enough of working with partners who can help provide you those sort of flexible data lenses, that approach to data that looks at multiple methodologies, especially when you're starting to think in this kind of holistic way. You want to make sure that you are always considering that approach because you need to start to connect the dots between those campaigns and those channels. I also just can't emphasize enough responsive, dynamic, and interactive ad types. For Machete, those some of our big stars were obviously the shoppable carousels and the product tiles or click to cart. They are just exactly the sort of thing that you're going to be looking for in these emerging trends, is anything that is going to make sure that they are always orienting towards spending your money, your budget the most effectively. And that is always going to be a data-driven path.
Well, and before I ask one last question, I do want to remind people watching, if you do have a question for any of our panelists, just make sure to write it in the question box and we'll take some time and answer as many as we can. So just make sure you take the time to do that now. But Sasha, I just got to throw it at you. It's all right, this creative, you got a lot thrown at you differently. You tested a lot. And you're really using insights as what the whole topic of a lot of this is, how insights and how we're driving better performance with creative. So talk about that and how marketers should approach this, how they should approach using those insights to drive their creative strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two pieces here for me. So one is being able to really use what you have is the main, that's the easiest way for me to say it. So sometimes we look at creative and creative gets stale to us because we look at it all day, right? And we don't realize that our customers or the new customers that we want to attract have not seen it at all. So sometimes it takes just reinventing. One of the things that I love to do is I love to take editorial images and then just zoom in on like we have one image where we zoomed in on the wrist, and that's my favorite picture now. And it's literally just her wrist, and it was a full body photo, and now the product is front and center. It feels fresh. We can reuse it. If they have multiple items in the shot, on one picture I may be focusing in on the earring while another I'm focusing in on the clip. So just reimagining things is just really important, and it allows you to just I'm able to pass it off to Anna Kate and team and say, hey, this is new, but it really is just new crops. So that's one way that I recommend leaning in. Then the other piece, which leads to the data information, is to lean into what works. Anna Kate probably hears me say this, probably 80% of the year is like, don't reinvent the wheel. If we're going to jump into something that's new, especially, what we love to do is we love to be able to grab ads that are already performing really well. And we'll say, hey, these are performing well in these places, so I believe that it will perform well here as well. That allows you to make a quick, easy, strategic decision. Now, sometimes, yes, we may test something and it doesn't do as well, but most of the time, it works. So just leaning into the testing that you've already done. I always say that people often test and they don't learn. So they always we'll test it as just a way to give yourself permission to do something. I'm very strict about making sure you come back to the learning aspect of it. So if you learn that something works, then just lean all the way into it.
Yep. No, I hear that a lot in terms of you getting all this data and almost too much data today.
Yeah.
But how are you actually using it and speaking to consumers?
Yeah.
So
or my favorite thing to say is like, we're doing a lot of testings. When will we graduate? At what point will we graduate here? And so you have to have an end goal in mind.
We will never graduate.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let's open it up to any questions. Let's see. I see some that have come up here. We have one from Sammy, and let me just get that. What are your goals for the creative moving into BFCM season? You mentioned not running before, but what do you hope to see? I would say, let's go to you, Sasha, for that first.
So, I mean, for us, for creative, we are, like I just said, some of it is to leaning into what we know, right? So we're looking at the ad creative that it's funny that you say this because this is something that Anna Kate and I are literally in the middle of right now. So some of it is leaning into what we know. And so from last year and from this year and taking some of those learnings and also being okay with doing a lot of A/B testing. So a simple example is that we had a very simple approach to an ad set last year that performed really well. We'd like to be able to repeat that this year, but we're not sure which colorway we want to go with. So we're going to put 2 in flight and see which one does better in the early days, and we'll just consistently evolve, which goes back to what we've been saying over and over as well, as being very flexible to make adjustments. But basically, we're making a bunch so that we can dwindle it down and make sure that we're spending the most on where it makes sense. Do you want to lean into that, Anna Kate?
Yeah, I would say one of the key things that we're really focused on, especially in these product tile formats, is diversifying the product mix that we're showing. We've always relied on what we know to be our best sellers. We'll continue to do that. But when it comes to promotions and seasonal kind of gifting at the end of the year, we have really strong data to guide us as to what products we should pair together. So not just best sellers, but if we know people are people are purchasing these 3 products always together at the end of the year because they're gifting it, or if there's products that we know that are more aligned with gifting, monogram, for instance, is something that we know and we feel really strongly is great for a seasonal time. So that's the ways that we're going about looking ahead at Black Friday, Cyber Mondays, figuring out not only what are our best sellers that we can put into market, but how can we use what we know from like our holiday mindset to inform the creative that we're putting in market.
Makes sense. Well, I think this question would actually go to you as well, Anna Kate, because you talked about balance early on. And how do you envision the balance between brand storytelling and data-driven strategies evolving in the next few years? And that's from Danielle.
Yeah, good question. I think that we're always going to be kind of rubbing against each other from a brand storytelling and a data-driven approach. That is something Sasha and I even talk about a lot now, is like, we get into conversations like, I don't really like this. And I'm like, but it's working, and it's hard. And I think that will continue to kind of evolve. But what we're seeing across not just the e-com kind of direct to consumer space is the importance of the brand and kind of the humanization and personification of the brand. It's not just about like, hey, can we get you to buy our product? But Something that Machete's done really well is the founder, JJ, has been involved in a lot of marketing materials, and putting her kind of at the center of the mix helps us balance not only the brand piece and the storytelling piece, but also gives us a chance, like we've been talking about, to test something new. But I think that friction is going to kind of continue to exist, because from that performance marketing standpoint, we're trying to figure out what are the best and most efficient and high return creatives that we can put in market, but we do have to balance what conveys the story of the brand really well. I think it's only going to get harder. So Danielle, for your question, good luck to you and to all of us who are figuring that out.
Yeah, and I think I would like to add to that too. We're also noticing the same thing in other digital channels as well.
Yeah.
In some of more of our organic spaces, such as like in social media areas and email, we're noticing that the high performers, it's a mix between those sale items and your brand focused pieces, those inspirational pieces. And I think it's just, it helps the customer from being fatigued. And I've noticed whenever someone goes to either end of the spectrum and doesn't find that balance in the middle, they notice that there's a big dip. So it is important to make sure you're sprinkling both throughout your mix.
Well, I have time for one more question. I think this has your name all over it, Lesley. This is from David. In what ways do you think emerging technologies could transform the relationship between creative strategy and consumer engagement in the future?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a lot of the name of the game of everything we've talked about today. Something we didn't weigh in too much on yet so far is movement towards immersion. I think that we're going to start to see a lot of drive into improving the technologies that we do have that are centered around these kind of interactive spaces, but moving into capturing that premium inventory spaces that we used to find very exclusive, a little bit hard to reach for maybe mid-market brands, maybe smaller brands, newcomers into these different spaces. I think we're going to find that those to be increasingly more accessible, especially if you can leverage partnerships and relationships in the space so that you can get a little bit of a bigger bite of the pie into these kind of immersive driven creative ad units.
Got it. Anna-Kate, you're shaking your head a lot. Do you want to add? I don't want to cut you off if you have something you want to add.
I agree with everything Lesley said. I think that that's something that we have to keep our eye on. That's my job in the position that I sit in, is to have those conversations with Lesley and continue to bring those to Sasha and our other clients too. There is a lot of change. The media landscape, the creative landscape, everything is constantly evolving. And so bringing that open mind, better using the technology, Lesley hit on a lot, to kind of continue to drive our campaigns forward. And also, again, be kind of a first mover. So Lesley mentioned some new kind of technology that might be coming into play for these ad types. And those are things that we're already thinking about. How do we bring in try on and video elements and all of those things as we move forward with creative progression so that we can better align with that consumer expectation?
Awesome. Well, you guys, that was so great. Thank you so much. So insightful, each one of you, everything you had to say. So thank you again, Sasha, Anna-Kate, and Lesley, for your participation today. Really appreciate it. So you can say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
I had a chance to just kind of thank anyone or thank me. No. I need to give my own little pat on the back, but I also want to say, you notice the QR code has just come up. If you have any more questions that we didn't get to your question today, or two, something else pops up, I want you to take your camera, click onto the QR code and ask whatever. You'll be brought to a form where you can ask questions of the expert. You can also reach out to any one of our panelists directly on LinkedIn, and they'll be glad to help you out. So thanks again, guys, and thank you so much for watching and joining us for another edition of Media Post webinar series. Until next time.